I'd promised my old roommate Abby I would write her story down before the details blurred. Abby handles crisis hotlines for a living, so she's trained to stay calm, but her voice cracked when she called me 2 weeks ago. She'd flown to New Orleans for the French Quarter Festival and booked a Friday night tour of St. Louis Cemetery. No, one, the famous above ground maze of marble vaults. The brochure sold it as 90 minutes, 8 guests, 1 licensed guide, lantern supplied. No jump scare actors, just authentic history in the dark. Abby loves history. She also loves rules. She expected organized, respectful, safe. She got anything, but she showed up at 10:45 p.m. outside the Basin Street gate, humidity pressing like wet cotton. The group was small, a Brooklyn couple in matching rain shells, 2 bachelor party guys with GoPros still buzzing from Bourbon Street, a retired biology teacher from Wisconsin, and a local teenager escorting his tourist aunt. Their guide, Marcus, wore the tour company's indigo polo and carried a clipboard plus a string of dim green glow sticks for head count. He spoke in quick, clipped bursts, perfect pacing. Abby said, "Stay on the paths. Lantern batteries are intentionally half-charged, so conserve. Respect the tombs." They filed inside, lantern cones floating over cracked shells and angel statues. Marcus fired facts like nails. Yellow fever spikes, jazz funerals, voodoo queen legends. Abby drifted to the back to jot notes and snap low ISO shots. 30 minutes in, they reached the alley of Italian society vaults. Rain began as a fine mist, hissing on marble. Marcus paused to adjust the collar of his polo and talk about second-line parades. While Abby photographed a carved cherub, she sensed someone new behind her. A woman in a black city maintenance jacket, reflective strips dull under lantern glow, stood by a wrought iron side gate. She had a heavy key ring and a clipboard of her own. She caught Abby's eye, raised a finger to her lips, then beckoned with a subtle tilt of the head. "City preservation," she whispered. "We just opened a newly stabilized family vault off map. Tonight only. Quick peek if you want the shot." She flashed an ID card. The logo matched Marcus's shirt, just sun-bleached. Abby glanced at Marcus. He was describing burial leases. His lantern pointed the opposite way. Nobody else noticed. Abby weighed the risk uniform, badge, keys. It all looked official and nodded. The maintenance woman swung the side gate and led Abby and the Brooklyn couple down the narrow service path. The bachelor party guys heard them moving and tagged along, phones out, eager for exclusive footage. Rain thickened to a drizzle. At the end of the path stood a low marble structure with fresh mortar around the lintel. The woman slid a long barrel key into a rusted padlock, grunted the gate open, and gestured them inside. The vault smelled of wet limestone and old flowers. A portable LED lamp sat on the floor, casting weak yellow. The woman stepped back out. Metal clanged. A new padlock clicked shut. Things moved fast. Through the bar, she lifted a compact stun gun and a red tool bag. She told them to toss phones and wallets through the gate fast, no screaming. Her accent flattened into rough uptown New Orleans. The bachelor with the GoPro tried to negotiate. She thumbed the stun gun and cracked lightning off the bars, blue sparks jumping. The sound changed his mind. While they emptied pockets, Abby scanned the vault. Walls lined with tablet faces, an open cavity where a new coffin might slide, and, most important, a ventilation hole high in the rear wall, fist size, iron mesh rusty. The maintenance woman stuffed the haul into a nylon courier sack and slid a cheap burner phone between the bars. "Text your guide," she ordered Abby. "500 per head. Pay in 15 and I come back." The woman disappeared up the path. Abby's pulse hammered, but her training kicked in. She steadied her breath, Assessed assets. One bachelor still had a tiny Leatherman the woman missed. The biology teacher's inhaler was clipped to his belt pocket-sized aluminum screw top. Abby unscrewed it, dumped the meds, and used the tube like a socket to hold the Leatherman-esque can opener blade as an improvised hand drill. The Brooklyn man boosted his wife on his shoulders so she could reach the ventilation mesh. They were a climbing duo back home. Balance was natural. Abby fed the improvised drill up to her. She began twisting screws out of the rusted mesh. Abby texted Marcus anyway. Locked inside vault, fake city staff, east service path. One check mark appeared, message sent. Good, but they couldn't bank on rescue in time. Rain hammered the vault roof now, masking small noises. The Brooklyn woman freed 3 screws. A section of mesh bent inward. The hole was barely shoulder wide, but the local teenager was skinny. They hoisted him. He wormed through, scraping his hoodie. Outside, he landed on wet brickwork with a grunt. He sprinted the service path the other way toward the visitor entrance, not toward the thief. Minutes stretched. Inside the vault, air felt thinner. Lantern batteries guttered. Abby counted heartbeats, kept everyone whispering calm. Footsteps finally returned, heavy, quick. Not the thief's measured stride. Marcus's voice shouted their names. Keys rattled, padlock popped, gates swung. The thief's absence lasted only seconds. She rounded the corner, saw Marcus freeing the captives, and bolted the other way. But the teenager's ant fit from marathon training shoulder checked her at the junction. The courier bag flew. Phones and wallets spilled like candy. Marcus tackled the thief, kneeling on mud. A second guy arrived, radio crackling with cemetery patrol. They cuffed her with zip ties from their first aid pouch. Police statements followed under maintenance canopy while rain drummed in. The thief was a contractor who once cleaned vault graffiti. She kept gate keys and stitched a fake badge. Her scam. Peel small groups off, lock them in family vaults too remote for cameras, pressure guides for instant bank transfers, disappear into dream before dawn. Half-charged lanterns, fake uniforms, rainy night staffing gaps. It nearly worked. The tour company offered refunds and trauma counseling. Everyone refused counseling. The Brooklyn couple asked only for the photos back. Abby flew home Sunday. She mailed me the inhaler socket tool, cleaned and polished. It sits on my desk. Reminder that rules can be forged and uniforms can be stolen. She still loves cemeteries, but only in daylight, only after photographing every lock that might swing shut. The rest of her vacation footage is gorgeous long exposures of marble angels, glowing white. But the file. I remember shows a rain-slick vent grate, screws tumbling, and a girl hoisting herself toward open air. I promised my colleague Zara I'd write this down before the details slip, because her voice still trembles when she tries. Zara and I share a cubicle at a Glasgow ad agency. She's precise, cautious, allergic to drama, exactly the sort of person who triple checks Airbnb smoke alarms. 3 Fridays ago, she took her Canadian fiancé, Mark, on Glasgow Necropolis's night layer tour. 90 minutes, 12 guests, 1 licensed guide, lantern supplied, no cheap theatrics. A polite, history-soaked date. Zara expected fog, carved angels, maybe a nervous laugh. She got a lesson in how fast order dissolves when someone rewrites the rules mid-stride. They met at the Bridge of Sighs at 11 p.m. Zara counted 10 participants besides herself and Mark, a Spanish backpacker couple, 3 fourth year. Art students from St. Andrews live streaming on a single phone a retired postal worker named. Stokes and 4 American cruise passengers still wearing ship lanyards. Their guide Malcolm wore the Friends of the Necropolis badge and a high-waist gilet patched at their shoulders. He clipped half-charged torches to each guest's wrist lanyard. Keeps your hands free. And rattled instructions in quick, neat bursts. Stay on gravel paths, no flash photography. Respect monuments older than your country. Zara loved the cadence. Backed. Breath. Act. 15 minutes in, they reached John Knox's plinth. Fog climbed the hillside like slow surf. Malcolm held the lantern under his chin and told a 2-sentence story about grave robbers who sold fresh cadavers through the university's anatomy basement. Zara tuned her phone to record, stepped back to frame Knox's statue, and nearly collided with a second staff member. The newcomer wore the same badge, same gilet, but darker trousers. He carried a brass key ring as thick as a fist. His name tag read, Yuan, caretaker. He whispered just loud enough for Zara and the Spaniards to hear. Restoration Vault is open tonight. 2 minutes tops if you want untouched carvings. Main group loops back here anyway. Zara glanced at Malcolm. He was busy explaining Victorian symbolism to the crew's guests. Caretaker Ewan looked official, so Zara shrugged permission at Mark, and the 5 of them peeled off behind him. Zara, Mark, the Spaniards, and Stokes the retiree who never missed a local story. The art students stayed glued to Malcolm's spotlight. Ewan led them downhill along a service track hemmed by yews. Zara's torch had already dimmed to a sickly ring. They stopped at a wrought iron door set into the hillside. Caretaker's tunnel, date plate 1899. A fresh chain hung loose. Ewan slotted a tubular key, swung the door, and waved him into a narrow brick corridor, lit by a single utility strip. At the far end, a small room held stone slabs, buckets of lime wash, and an ancient mort safe, a cage once locked over graves to stop thieves. The moment the 5 stepped in, the utility light snapped off. The door slammed. Metal rattled hard. Twice. Zara's heart hiccuped. She fired her torch barely enough to see Mark's shocked face. Behind them, Ewan's silhouette filled the doorway. He clicked a padlock through the chain, yanked it tight, and slipped on a headlamp. Phones, wallets, cameras through the mort safe, he said, voice flat now. Fast. All of this will be easier if you shut up. He produced a short pry bar and a can of bear deterrent spray. No theatrics. Simple blunt leverage and capsaicin. Mark instinctively stepped forward. Ewan swung the pry bar at the chain-link mort safe, iron ringing like a gong. The threat landed, people complied. Zara passed her phone and bank card through the cage bars as fog breath condensed off her lips. Ewan shoved everything into a nylon tool bag, crouched to chain their ankles with 2-foot lengths of plastic-coated cable, then locked the cable to a floor bolt. He worked fast, an assembly line rhythm. The 5th person, Stokes, fumbled with a hearing aid and whispered he hadn't caught the pin instructions. Ewan leaned close, explained slowly, then tweaked the aid dial kindly, almost. But Zara saw his thumb switch the battery off before stepping back. Stokes never heard another word. When Ewan finished, he snapped a photo of each captive with their own phone. Ransom collateral. Then he pulled out a battered Nokia and slipped it through the cage. Text Malcolm 500 pounds per head, he told Zara. Payment in 15 minutes buys fresh air. Delay buy spray? He disappeared up the tunnel, headlamp bobbing, padlock rattling into place again. Footsteps faded. Silence settled, punctuated only by Stokes's confused breathing. Zara's crisis team instincts dawn. Assess, prioritize, act. Assets. 4 fading torches, her Fitbit, Mark's leather belt with a removable brass plate, a 3-meter tether of plastic-coated cable, And the mort safe itself, iron bars spaced just enough for a slim wrist. Weak points. The cable padlocked to a bolt sunk in Victorian mortar and the padlock at the door. Tools. Pry bar outside reach, but plenty of leverage points if they could free the cable first. She counted their cable's slack. 6 inches spare. Enough to reach the mort-safe bars if they lay flat and stretched. Mark unbuckled his belt, folded the brass tongue into a hook, and guided it between bars. The Spaniard Pablo used his torch body as a hammer, tapping the hook under the cable's nylon sheath until brass kissed shackle. The mort-safe's bars gave perfect counter torque. On the 10th tap, the padlock's cheap hasp bent, popped, and skittered across the stone. Chains fell whisper soft. Freedom tasted like copper. Zara pocketed the broken shackle evidence. She killed every torch except hers, saving battery. They crept to the door. Through a finger-wide gap, they saw an outside padlock glowing under an emergency light further down the track. No easy reach, Mark whispered. The cable itself could be a winch if threaded through door bars, doubled round the mort safe, and hauled as a pulley. Zara looped it, forming a crude capstan. It wasn't about breaking the chain. It was about ripping the hasp from Victorian brick softened by damp centuries. On count of 3, they heaved. Plastic-coated steel sang, mortar groaned, brick dust sprinkled like icing. Second pull, louder groan. Third crack. The angle iron ripped free, padlock still intact but now dangling. The door swung outward, cold fog slapped cheeks. They hurried uphill, sticking to graveside shadows. Zara's torch died for good. Moonlight and city glow guided them until they spotted Malcolm's lantern bobbing atop the Knox plinth. He was alone, pacing tight circles, phone at his ear. Zara hissed his name. He jumped, then sprinted down as she explained in 2-second sentences. Malcolm radioed control. Within minutes, a patrol van growled across the footpath, tires crunching grit. Officers split one, escorted the victims to the van. The other followed Malcolm and Mark back to the tunnel entrance. Voices echoed, a scuffle, then bear spray mist drifted white in the spotlight. Ewan stumbled out, eyes streaming, plastic bag of phones clutched like laundry. Steel cuffs replaced his key ring. The aftermath felt slower than the attack. Police spread evidence bags on the patrol van bonnet, pry bar, spray, nylon cable cutters, a USB reader loaded with victim ID photos, and 20-odd blank SIM cards. Turns out Ewan was no caretaker. He'd been dismissed from a stone cleaning contract months earlier for forging overtime hours. He'd copied a badge before security deactivated his pass. Half-charged torches, keyring authority, and a tunnel nobody monitors after 9 p.m. That was the Manco. He'd rehearsed ransom timing on smaller city graveyards. Necropolis was meant to be the big score before tourist season ended. Statements bled into dawn. Stokes' hearing aid needed a new battery, but he insisted on finishing his report first. The Spaniards canceled their Isle of Skye detour and booked a same-day flight home. Malcolm offered free lifetime tours. Nobody accepted. Zara and Mark walked to Clyde at sunrise, too wired for sleep. On Monday, Zara slid the broken padlock hasp onto my desk, rust still flaking. "Cheap metal saved us," she said, voice steady now. She's added a bypass knife tool to her travel kit and memorizes every unlit side path before a tour starts. Mark swaps half-charged batteries for fresh ones the moment a guide turns away. They still love fog-carved angels, Victorian masonry, but only when they can see the nearest gate, and only after asking who holds the real keys. I'm writing this for my cousin Denise because every time she tries, her hands shake. Denise is the level-headed one in our family budget spreadsheets, labeled luggage cubes, pepper spray on every key ring. 9 other people stood in the amber glow of the gate lamps. A Seattle honeymoon couple, sharing. A Fuji mirrorless Toon YU film majors live streaming. A Queen's history podcaster with a fuzzy boom, Micah, Michigan. Father-son duo road tripping the coast, and a retired MT named Gloria wearing an FDNY cap. I'll escort a small group through the service corridor while I reset the panel safer, then walking the dark ramp. He unlocked a steel maintenance door, waved them inside a concrete hallway lined with power conduits, then pulled the door shut. A click knife blade opening. No theatrics, just a methodical robber in a borrowed jacket. He swung a dim camping lantern overhead, revealing a work table beside the breaker box. Cable ties, duct tape, a roll of gaffer. He bound wrists fast, plastic-biting skin, and dropped valuables into the Pelican. His plan spilled out in casual notes. Nora wouldn't worry for 12 minutes. He lifted a pry bar, threatened knees if anyone liked. She leaned on the wall, covering the final hiss of broken plastic at her wrists. As Joe backed in with the Pelican, Gloria flicked her trauma shear, open short, blunt tip, designed to cut seatbelts without stabbing. She punched the lift's call button anyway. The motor groaned but stayed idle. She toggled the phone's torch and began filming evidence. Film major number 2 yanked duct tape from the workbench and wrapped Joe's ankles, then wrists, layering until plastic creaked. Inside, 6 phones, 4 wallets, 3 lenses wrapped in socks, and a small bolt cutter. The Michigan teen offered her hot chocolate from a thermos. The wife pressed the scarf pin into Denise's hand. "Knighting you official trip guardian," she said, voice shaky, but grateful. Denise keeps that pin on her camera strap now. Tiny brass reminder that a square inch of metal can topple a plan built on borrowed uniforms and fading batteries. She sipped, shivering, then promised lifetime free daytime tours. Everyone declined except Gloria, who asked if they could add CPR stations along the paths. Joe's badge was laminated inkjet, his fleece stolen from the laundry shack. He'd once subcontracted for grounds lighting repairs, memorized tour timetables, and hoarded duplicate keys. She still loves lantern tours. She still believes history feels different at midnight. But she trusts steel staples, padlock stamps, and fuse puller rubber shavings more than any contractor badge that appears from the fog. Half-charged torches dulled vigilance. A utility scooter looked official enough to peel small groups off the main route. Gloria found a roll of bright surveyor tape, tied it to the lift gate as a signal flag. They needed Nora. The interior shaft phone was dead copper, gutted long ago. She sliced the honeymoon wife free, then the husband. Denise stepped behind Joe, lifted the heavy rubber fuse puller shard, and slammed it into the back of his knee. Her radio crackled. Security golf cart was 2 minutes away. They hauled Joe out, sat him on the gravel, and left the duct tape as makeshift cuffs until security replaced it with steel. Cartilage popped. Joe folded, yelping, knife skittering into darkness. The husband grabbed the pry bar and shoved Joe against the lift rail. Gloria's shears snapped the film major's ties. 6 on 1. Denise stepped forward exactly as told, but flicked her hands apart mid-stride. Joe's eyes were on the film major's camera bag. He missed it. Greenwood's camera loop that this wing rewinds every 15. He'd exit through a utility lift to the perimeter gate, hop a lift in Sunset Park, and pawn everything on Canal by dawn. A new padlock clanked. The corridor lamps flickered once, then blacked out. Nora grimaced at her scheduled sprinklers kick on at midnight, then asked for volunteers. Denise, the honeymoon couple, the film majors, and Gloria stepped forward. Gloria's M-Delt pouch still held a trauma shear Joe hadn't noticed. It blended with the nylon webbing. The breaker box door was ajar, exposing old screw-in cartridges. But more important, fat rubber fuse puller hanging on a hook. Denise shuffled, wrists zip-tied in front, nudged her shoulder to signal Gloria. The retired EMT caught on, inched her scissor pouch forward. 10 minutes, Nora promised, and they'd all meet at the Bronze Angel. Denise bent, gripped the rubber fuse puller between both hands, and twisted. Gloria's turn. Denise crouched, pretending to adjust her loose shoelace. Slipped the rubber edge to the EMT. Gloria's zip tie parted on the second scrape. The honeymoon husband mouthed, "Me," eyes wide. Denise nodded. The puller's jaws snapped off, a chunk of dense rubber the size of a thumb. Rubber shreds silently in most rooms. Joe didn't notice. She slid the shard between her wrists, sawing plastic ribs. Slow, steady, breath held, zip tie popped. Their guide, Nora, wore the cemetery as bottle green fleece and clipped half-charged. LED torches to everyone's wrists. Keeps both hands free for railings, she said, in quick, sharp sentences. Denise liked the cadence. Fact, pause, fact. Last November, she flew to New York for a design summit and tacked on Greenwood cemeteries, moonlight mausoleums, walk as a Saturday treat. 90 minutes, 10 guests, 1 licensed guide, wrist torches supplied, no actors, no Ouija hype. Everything about it looked organized and respectable, the way Denise likes it. She reached the Gothic arch on 5th Avenue at 10:45 p.m. The November air tasted of iron. They followed. Nora along the ridge where Civil War generals sleep beneath granite angels. Fog drifted off the lake, thinning the torchlight to milky cones. 20 minutes in, at the Gothic Revival Chapel, a man rolled up on a silent electric utilities. Same fleece. Older. A silver ID tag read Joe Car Facilities. He carried a padded Pelican case and a handheld multimeter that beeped with convincing urgency. Internal breaker tripped at the Tranquility Mausoleum, he told Nora. Half the sconce lights are dead. Tours can keep going if you split. Joe led them down a gravel spur lit only by his scooter's headlamp. Denise's wrist torch was already guttering. Joe's voice flattened. Phones, watches, cash into the backpack. Denise's pulse hammered, but her brain stayed clear. She scanned assets. The honeymoon wife's scarf, pinned solid brass. Joe turned his back, knife tapping the Pelican latches. She kept her hands together, hiding freedom. Joe snapped the Pelican shut, hefted it, and ordered everyone against the wall. Gloria's voice, calm as a paramedic shift, chimed in. "Sir, I'm 68. Let me shift my weight before I move." Joe marched them to an old freight lift. He jammed a key into the lock, pulled the accordion gate. Denise smelled dust and machine oil. Denise hit the alarm bell. Nothing. Old wiring. Film Major, #1 remembered their livestream battery pack survived the search. Joe hadn't realized it was a power bank. The corridor rattled Nora's knock. Worried. Denise shouted password details only a guest would know. Nora keyed in, lantern blazing. Under flood lamps at the gate, police itemized the Pelican. Statements stretched till 2 a.m. Nora's cheeks stayed wet anger, not tears. Denise Ubered back to Manhattan with the honeymoon couple. Next week, she bought a 3-pack of ceramic escape blades and extra bright owls.